Welcome to the Red Dirt Agronomy Podcast. My name is Dave Deacon, and have we got a great episode for you? We're talking about weather and water with two guests that stopped by the Oklahoma Wheat Commission and Oklahoma Wheat Growers Association booth at the KNID AgriFest just a couple of weeks ago. We start out with Wes Lee from the Oklahoma Mesonet and Oklahoma State University, and after the break, we're talking with Dr. Paul Weckler with the Biosystems Ag Engineering Department at Oklahoma State University about some exciting news when it comes to water in Oklahoma. By the way, you'll be able to find all of the information that we talked about in this episode and past episodes on our website, reddirtagronomy.com. As always, we start with a quick trip around the table for an introduction to the dream team of dirt and everything that grows in it. Let's start with Oklahoma State University Extension Cropping System Specialist.
That's all that I can harvest in a year. You know, I put out maybe 16, but only 2 of them survived.
Dr. Josh Lofton. And of course, next to him is Oklahoma State University Extension Precision Nutrient Management Specialist. It's hard to say that in one breath.
I love talking to K-Staters. Like, well, you have Mesonet, but it's not the Mesonet. So take that, Ignacio and Romulo and all those.
Dr. Brian Arnell. Before we get to the interviews, I need to give a quick reminder that this was recorded on January 13th, 2024, and at the time of recording, we were bracing for the sub-zero temperatures that would eventually hit a lot of the state of Oklahoma. You are listening to the Red Dirt Agronomy Podcast. Wes, have you ever listened to our podcast?
I have.
Oh, you have?
I have.
Oh, cool.
Dave, you're famous, so we followed you when you left us at OSU.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate
You
that.
must be a toll booth operator.
Yeah, exactly
in previous
right.
life.
Well,
That's who you're big with. So.
I was going to say I'm big with and then they eliminated all the toll booths across Oklahoma.
So now nobody knows you.
Nobody knows who I am. No, that's okay though. I've always said I'm the most forgettable person you'll ever meet. And it's held true with a lot of situations, too. So
that's a good thing.
But, Wes, I guess I'll let you do the official introduction of yourself. You're with the Oklahoma Mesonet, but you're also with Oklahoma State University Extension. I got to make sure to get all the words in there.
You remember that university. So.
Right.
Yeah, I'm with Oklahoma Mesonet, which is a system that's jointly operated by OU and OSU together. OU interested primarily in public safety.
Right.
OSU interested more from the agriculture standpoint.
Right.
I'm a long-time employee, about 35 years with OSU.
Wow.
I think 6 years now with the Oklahoma Mesonet, which is still part of the OSU Cooperative Extension Service.
Right. And as part of that, there are different focuses as part of the Oklahoma Mesonet. You kind of are the go-to guy for the agricultural side of it.
We have 4 or 5 different categories that we work on the Oklahoma Mesonet. You know, a couple of the big ones would be a program called OK First, which is public safety,
right.
OK Fire, which works with fire prevention as well as prescribed fire, that's more on the agriculture side. And then my section is the agriculture section. I'm the one and only employee that works in the agriculture section there, but it is a major part of our Mesonet program.
Yeah. And just for the folks that are not familiar, there are 120 Mesonet sites across the state, and the Oklahoma Mesonet celebrating their 30th year in operation.
Yeah, we officially started January 1 of 1994. Mm-hmm. This January would be our 30-year anniversary.
Yeah.
That most of the towers were installed sometime from the late 80s through that 94. Took a couple of years to get them all in, but officially when we flipped the switch, started giving data out to the public was January 1 of 1994.
Okay, so I didn't realize there was that much prep time.
There was.
That they actually got the installation instead of putting one up and releasing it. They actually prepped. So how many towers or how many stations do you know before they went live?
When we originally went live was somewhere around 110.
Oh, wow. So they really had this system together fully.
It wasn't the full 120 we have today because a few of those have been added over the years. You know, we got the money up front to put the system in. It was something called oil overcharge funds that the governor at the time give us for that, as well as money that both universities put in for the initial startup. That allowed us to get all of that infrastructure in initially, and then the hard part of keeping those running for 30 years and the money to operate that. It's quite expensive to take care of 120 towers with the number of sensors and stuff.
How's that budgeting work as far as maintenance and upkeep? Is that coming from the state, Fed, the universities, a combination of all?
A combination of all. We get our
and the tip jar.
And the tip jar.
Our primary source of funding is through higher ed. Before OSU and OSU get their money, we get a piece of that. We also generate about half of our funds with special projects, being grants, sale of data fees.
Yep.
You know, we're people in Oklahoma. We're totally free to anybody here in Oklahoma, college students, citizens. But you go outside of Oklahoma, want to access our data. Say, I want to see that 30-year data set on temperature change at a location. We actually charge a fee for that.
Okay.
So we do generate about half our funds for that. And then there is a federal component as well, a national mesonet program that doles out money based on the number of towers and the number of products and the number of recordings you have. Since we're so large and have all of the data that we have, we actually receive more money than any of the other states on that program. So a combination of all those funds, but I still have to go back that higher ed is probably our primary funding source.
One thing people don't realize whenever you see the TV stations, they show, well, it's 53 degrees in Breckenridge.
Yep.
Not today, but you know, that's actually a mesonet site, and the television stations pay for that information.
I was about to ask that.
Yeah, there is a subscription fee for the television stations, radio stations as well. It's based on their viewership.
Okay.
It's very inexpensive versus some of the other sources of data they have to get. You know, since they pay for that data, they're allowed to do whatever they want to with it. So you will usually not see our mesonet logo on the state news at night because it's rightfully their data to do whatever they want with. When we first started, we were issuing that information to them with the requirement that they gave credit to Oklahoma Mesonet, but that's changed over the years. I can't tell you the exact amount of money, but it's relatively small.
Right.
Just
they have to buy in.
Kind of a token amount of money they have to buy into the program.
But I don't know how many times when severe weather's here, you know, and the forecasters are like, well, tell me what the wind speed is at the mesonet in this county.
I mean, they do
like
acknowledge the
all
mesonet
time.
often on live TV, so it's kind of cool on that aspect.
Yeah, it depends on the weather forecaster, which one's up there. Some of the major forecasters, the main ones, tend to like to act like it's their information that they've got, but I would call them the junior forecasters, who some of them have the most college education in meteorology. They're the ones that heavily rely on that mesonet data for their job.
I had the opportunity to help the Mesonet a few years ago produce a video kind of highlighting the 25-year mark.
Right. Yeah.
And excuse me, in that process,
you're getting tore up.
It's been 5 years. It's picking up speed too. But I had the opportunity to not only talk to folks across Oklahoma, but I had the opportunity to sit down with the administrator of NOAA, I believe he was, or the head of the National Weather Service, one of the two. But I went to Washington, D.C. and sat down with him and talked about what a system like the Oklahoma Mesonet means to them, because they are using that data to help weather systems in Arkansas moving towards the east. The data that is gathered in Oklahoma is helping with the forecasting in other places. And he said, I'm paraphrasing, but the Oklahoma Mesonet is the gold standard. And he would give anything to have that level of accuracy of weather measurement all across the country. And in my time, whenever I was with Oklahoma State, I had a couple of emails from folks from other states asking, well, how do I get a hold of this person at the Oklahoma Mesonet so that way we can start talking about that?
Yeah, we have very strong support from the Oklahoma legislatures that are in D.C. In fact, they're some of the strongest proponents of this national Mesonet program.
Oh, wow.
That trying to allocate some funds to get Mesonet started in states that currently do not have any recording in there. But, we have really good support from both state and our federal legislatures on that. There are about 32 states that have some type of Mesonet system out there. we just, as you mentioned, we are referred to a lot of times as the gold standard because we have been around for 30 years, continuously collecting that weather data on a 5-minute interval going back that far.
That's amazing.
A lot of states start a program when they have a major disaster like a hurricane.
Right.
They get some federal funding, some allocations. They'll run for 2 or 3 years, and then they lose funding and disappear till the next major storm event comes along. Nebraska, being one of the first mesonet systems in the country, they had a tough time the last few years budget-wise, and they are actually shut down a lot of their towers last year on that. But we're fairly strongly supported financially in Oklahoma. Our funding is very solid. We're looking to expand instead of reduce towers here in Oklahoma.
As we look at that, Kansas is trying to build up there, and I love talking to K-Staters. Like, well, you have Mesonet, but it's not the Mesonet. So take that, Ignacio and Romulo and all those. Yeah. But if we look at that, is there a state that has already gone up to what we can produce, or is there the one that's coming up that you see? Okay, this is going to be the next.
Actually, Kansas has made a lot of progress in the last few years, but the state that has the system closest to Oklahoma would be Kentucky.
Oh, wow.
Oklahoma, Kentucky, and then New York.
I was going to say New York.
Yeah, New York, after Hurricane Sandy, they put a lot of money into that system, but they're one of the states that has came and went over the years of building up and tearing down. We've been involved, or not me, but Mesonet personnel in Oklahoma have been involved with all those other states.
Yeah.
We send people, they request, we send people to help start New York.
Right.
We helped start a system in Canada. We have a team in Peru right now starting a Mesonet system on some, we get financial assistance to go down and provide our expertise. They were in Europe, I know, last year doing some startup type funds. So we've been involved with nearly every state that has came along. But if you ask for the closest one to our system, it would probably be Kentucky. Kansas has a good system. I would say they're probably in the top 5 of the Mesonet programs in the country. They had an issue in that they started out buying whatever tower was on sale, whatever sensor was on sale, no uniformity across the state. They're going back now and trying to correct that and put the 10-meter tall towers like we have, the sensors across the state that are all uniform. I would say about half of their counties maybe have a tower in them today. Yeah. And if you go to their website, you'll see a lot of Oklahoma Mesonet products that they use our models and things, and we're proud of that.
Well,
so.
I mean, we're all extension, right? And what does extension do? We steal from other extensions, so we don't have. I mean, why redo something that's functional? You just rework it for your region, because.
And put your state's name on it.
Extension is better about not reinventing the wheel than some other groups like research like to reinvent the wheel. Everywhere is like, no. And there's so much stuff that Extension does that I steal from other folks. Man, that works good. Let's just spin it to Oklahoma and just roll.
Yeah. Copying, I guess that's flattery when they copy products you have. You mentioned Kansas, and if one idea to tell you how successful Oklahoma has been compared to those other states, go to any search engine, type in Mesonet. The top 3 or 4 hits are going to be Oklahoma Mesonet.
Yeah. Yep. And you talked about not only expanding, but you guys updated a lot of things just recently. Your webpage and your interface and all that. How's all that going?
After a little trial period, getting people used to the new website, and change is always difficult for some people. We did Valentine's Day of last year, released a new website that is somewhat mobile friendly. That's our goal, to make everything we have work on a cell phone. There, so our weather section, our forecast section, and our agriculture section all were updated to where they work flawlessly on a cell phone, as well as they do still work on a computer or tablet. Any platform, it'll automatically adjust to the size of the screen you're using. We're chipping away at the rest of that website, trying to release other sections. Hopefully, in the next few weeks, we'll be releasing another website that'll have a couple more of our weather tabs fully mobile friendly.
Well, and Dave, I'm still stealing from you. This is why you guys don't let me talk, because I have to steal time from you. But Wes, we just had you in our me and Brian have a class on campus, and we just had you in there, and it's one of those things that a lot of people go on the Mesonet and they're like kind of almost overwhelmed with how much stuff is there. But kind of what we learned from you in the class is we don't even have an access to half of the stuff that's actually there.
Right.
So,
But you can subscribe to that. No.
some of it you can't. Some of it you
I'm
can't.
just joking.
So explain for maybe folks that don't know what is kind of those layers underneath that Mesonet offers to, like you said, like the weather folks, the first responders, and some of those things that Mesonet does provide that the general public might not even know.
Yeah, if you take a look at our website, there's several tabs across the top. The only one that is password protected is the OK First section.
Yeah.
And they did that. That's a category for storm chasers, emergency management personnel. Anybody that's been through that training program, which starts out as an initial 4-day training, so it's a pretty good time commitment to get there. There's roughly 1,000 people in Oklahoma currently trained and have access to that site. But once they get into that location, not only do they have some enhanced software like radar systems that are more powerful and more useful for storm chasing than the regular radar that we put on the public site.
Yeah.
They also have chat rooms and discussion areas so that they can pass that information back and forth between emergency management personnel. And it wouldn't be prudent to have the general public gumming that up or interfering with the transmission of that data there. We continue to try to improve. We've got a huge project going on this summer on our Mesonet towers, adding some new sensors. I think there are 16 different categories of sensors now. We're going to add something called volumetric water this summer to all of our towers.
Okay.
So is it an add or replace?
It's an add. We're actually going to keep our soil sensors that we have.
That's what I was actually...
Yeah. Volumetric water is more widely used by researchers than the general public. So we have had our soil sensors in for so long. Our farming community are used to our products.
Yeah.
We're going to add two, not at least temporarily. I mean,
thinking about these stations have been on since the late 80s. Well, not been on. They've been installed since the late 80s, early 90s. The technology, how do you maintain consistency in technology when we're talking water sensing all of it from top down?
Every 5 minutes for the past 30 years.
I know, but I'm talking about the technology evolution
Yeah.
within the system, because I can only imagine the towers that were put up, even in 95, that 95% that's obsolete and no longer serviceable. So how does the Mesonet deal with that kind of tech evolution?
When new technology does come along, it seems like we kind of lag behind the standard, the industry standard for a while. But then we are able to maybe make a big leap. And these volumetric water sensors may be a good example of that. Temporarily, or at least for the near future, we're going to leave the soil sensors we have in now that measure soil temperature and soil moisture. But this is going to be in addition to it. Once we become familiar with them, start developing ag products that the public are used to, then we may replace or take off the others. Another example may be, I know we're doing a lot of research on sonic anemometers. New technology, a little more newer than what we have up, but the replacement. We have 120 towers on the public side. I think there's 37 additional towers we take care of with the ARS Ag Research Surface. So that's a lot of sensors to replace at one time. Yeah. So if we're always doing research, trying to find the newest, best technology, and then trying to come up with the funds to make a system-wide improvement to do that.
So your tech's fairly, because I can only imagine on some of this instrumentation, there's not a replace, it's a repair, because you can't like replace meaning not a new, but I've got this and it broke, I can just buy a new one.
Have you ever seen?
I'm
their
assuming
trucks,
there's,
Have you ever seen their trucks, the back end of their trucks? I mean, when they go out and service a site, they probably have.
Yeah. Our goal is to not replace broken sensors. Yeah. We have everything on a rotational schedule. Okay. So our goal is to get out and take those rain gauges before they wear out or before they quit, put a new one on or a rebuilt one on, take that one back into the lab and rebuild them or reservice them.
That's cool.
One thing that when I went to work for Mesonet 6 years ago, one of the biggest eye-openers I had was the quality control that they have on their instruments. No matter what sensor it is, regardless of what it costs, they go to the laboratory when they're bought new for a two or 3 week period of time to be calibrated to Oklahoma's conditions. Yeah. If it's a rainfall gauge, can it handle the 3 days rainfall events that only accumulate 300ths of an inch, or can it handle that 14 inches a day we might encounter?
Right.
So you would think a $600-800 rain gauge would be good enough to go right out into the field. And we also have 2 of everything. So 2 rain gauges, 2 air temperatures. So if one of them does quit,
active on the okay, I didn't realize everything was duplicated.
We rain gauges in the same location, say air temperature at 2 different locations on the tower, humidity 2 different locations. So if one of them does go out, we're not totally in the dark until we can get them replaced. But our goal is to go out in what we call service intervals and change that equipment out before it starts giving us trouble. That doesn't say we still get trouble tickets. This is out. Soil sensors happen to be more troublesome than all the other sensors put together. Even though
they're
we
not
have
being used, we don't have any moisture in the ground.
Even though we have lightning arresters, lightning rods, that becomes an issue. Our gopher population in Oklahoma, our clay soils, the cracking, swelling,
rattlesnakes, ants,
even
coyotes,
wildlife. I was going to say, we've had issues with wildlife. Even cattle may be dragging those out of the ground when everything's fenced, but if they get through the fencing, we've had issues with that. When it was really dry, some of the past droughts or 2, that may be the only green grass in the pasture, and it's only 10 meters square, but cattle
they'll find a way.
Try to find a way to get in there. So
I actually want to reverse this to ask the doctors here. You guys rely on information from the Mesonet and some of the Mesonet sites across the state. Kind of talk about what that means, the information, the data that you get, say, at Perkins or Bixby or wherever, that how does that help you with what you're researching?
Well, I mean, like, I could probably speak for Brian, at least for all of our students, at very least, just the temperature, moisture, potential soil moisture, rainfall, all that kind of just are standard that go into every student, any and every student, any presentation and all that. And that's not even to say things like, Dr. Auctioner's students that might rely very heavily on that grid across the state on me and Brian might use 2, but some others use.
You don't work very hard.
That's all that I can harvest in a year. I put out maybe 16, but only 2 of them survive.
That's fair enough.
But some other in our department use 20, 30 in a student project, in every research project. So coming from a state that didn't have it, and we had to put out our own weather stations if we were going to have any hope to collect anything, to something that you just now almost rely on to. And don't even think about it, and probably don't take it into account how valuable it is. Of just, I'm gonna email Mesonet to get the data. Not only the data, but it's like, hey, I need the data for the last 3 years.
Oh yeah,
and within 30 minutes, bam, there it is in your inbox.
Week 1 on new grad student initiation. It's the Mesonet day. We spend 2 hours like, this is what you have at your access. Now let's go into the data request. Here's how we do. Mesonet and Wes and I had this talk, and he already knew it, but it is a couple years ago. I was like, it'd be really great if some of your graphs could be in metric, so when we have to give presentations, we don't recreate. So historically, we had to recreate all the graphs. We'd see it in the U.S. imperial units, and we'd have to recreate it for. Now you could just switch that up. And so all the grads, you go to ASA and OSU, there'll be almost every poster has data from Mesonet listed on it. Application, we're based out of Stillwater, right? We have plots in Altus, we have plots in Panhandle, we have plots in Miami, we have plots everywhere. Deciding what day to go plant. And so looking at soil moisture, luckily most of our sites have Mesonet either on the research station or near farmer field. So it's what's the soil moisture, what's the wind speed, what's humidity, what's the soil temp, can we plant in Blackwell, or do we need to drop down to Kingfisher to plant? And so even just farmer type questions is heavily Mesonet related.
One thing we do to keep track of citations and dissertations, thesis applications. I'm proud to report Oklahoma State is the largest user of our data.
Wow.
We have more citations, more graduate students using our products every year than any place else, including OU. But
wow.
Well, and not even that. So that's the other thing, Brian. You do a good point. Is like in our extension documents too.
Oh,
because like in the sorghum variety testing program, I can go and put this is how much rain it got, and this is the temperature and the average. But it's a lot more effective whenever I can put the heat map on there.
Oh,
and it's not only that, it's flip of a switch and a press of a button to do difference from 30-year average. And that's something that in another state
I
or
had
30
Mesonet
years
in the slides
ago,
that I gave you for the sorghum talk yesterday.
there you go. 30 years ago, you would have had to spend a whole day doing it. But they fortunately have us for a push of a button, and
we are spoiled.
300ths of a second, it's there on your computer screen.
And that has to help you with getting grants to help some of the crops that you're looking at researching, some of the other things that go into building a grant to help that.
If you look at like the Climate Smart grants we've been a part of, all the NIFA, AFRI, the big grants, part of all those big federal grants have infrastructure available.
Right.
And the Mesonet is listed as, we have the infrastructure. We don't have to go buy 20 hobo stations to put out because we have the Mesonet.
Right.
I just dropped a but it's, we've got those, and so we can do it. So that's really adds up.
Well, that's great. Well, Wes, thank you so much for coming over and talking with us about the Oklahoma Mesonet. This is it. I've always been a super fan of Oklahoma weather products, and this is one of the best in the country, and it's right here. And it's I don't want to say free to Oklahomans, but it's part of your tax dollars. You might as well use it, and it's available to the public.
And I would plug in, and it's not Wes, it's his counterparts, but even if you're not in Oklahoma, follow the Mesonet on social media because it is probably one of the best feeds that you can get just for pure.
Gary McManus is a genius.
He's something.
And Andrea,
I'm waiting for my Brahms index for Monday and Tuesdays. So I haven't seen the Brahms index yet. So
thanks, Wes.
We appreciate it. Thanks, Dave. You've got as long a reputation with Mesonet as anybody, so we appreciate being part of your podcast.
Thank you.
Well, we're taking a quick break so we can switch out microphones for the guests. And while we do that, I want to remind you to hit the subscribe button where you get your podcasts. And if you want to learn more about what Wes and the doctors were talking about, jump over to reddirtagronomy.com for all of that information and a place to submit questions for the doctors. It's always fun to hear from you guys, and it was a lot of fun to meet up with those of you that came out and saw us in Enid. Now that everybody's back in place, let's dive back in. Now with Dr. Paul Weckler, and we learn about the new project that will help Oklahomans know exactly how much water and soil moisture is available to all industries. You are listening to the Red Dirt Agronomy Podcast.
With us today, we have Dr. Paul Weckler. Paul is in the Biosystems Ag Engineer, the BAE program. Paul, I've been working with Paul now since I was almost an undergraduate. So Paul has a long history. I love bringing him into our classes, talking about the stuff he did pre-OSU. If you want to talk drones, Paul's been doing drones longer than drones had a name of drones, basically. But we've got some new news, and he was sharing with us about what him and Tyson Auctioner kind of have some money for. So kind of want to visit about this new HydroNet, and I think I got the word right. So, Paul, thanks for coming on the podcast, and let's talk a little bit about what you and Tyson have got going on.
Well, a couple of years ago, we got a request from OSU administration to think about potential ideas that could be given to our congressional delegation for projects that would benefit Oklahoma. And based on some of the work we had done in southwest Oklahoma with the Rural Renewal Initiative, the idea of better water monitoring capabilities.
Oh, okay.
Because we were working with farmers that pumping out of the Blaine Aquifer near Hollis that would run out of groundwater before the growing season was over because they had no real-time information on how much water was left in the water table. And then think about the floods that we had in Stillwater in 2019.
Yeah.
Sanger Road, Highway 51 underwater. City of Stillwater officials had no idea in real time how much water was coming out of Lake Carl Blackwell that was then flooding parts of Stillwater. So we proposed an idea that kind of went up through OSU and then up through our congressional delegation, and to our surprise, it was selected and put in the appropriations bill a little more than a year ago for $1.8 million to expand water monitoring in the state of Oklahoma. And our long-term vision on it would be to develop what we're calling the HydroNet, which would be very similar to the Oklahoma Mesonet for weather monitoring. And so one of the first things we're doing with the $1.8 million in our Phase 1 funding is we are upgrading all the soil moisture sensors on all 120 Mesonet stations around the state. So they will have new state-of-the-art, highly accurate and repeatable soil moisture sensors installed over the next year. We're working with Oklahoma Water Resources Board to greatly expand the number of groundwater monitoring, water well monitoring locations, and including real-time telemetry so we can get groundwater levels in real time in many parts of the state, and increasing the number in critical areas like the Ogallala Aquifer, putting more down in the Blaine Aquifer area, and then working with USDA, NRCS, and ARS on and OWRB on more surface water monitoring. If you think about Oklahoma, we have a lot of big lakes, and those are monitored very well by the Army Corps of Engineers. Lake Texoma, Kaw Lake, Keystone. And then the U.S. Geological Survey, USGS, has stream gauges on some of the big rivers. But you think about like the Cimarron River, there's only one or two stream gauges along the whole length of the Cimarron River, and there are lots of places that flood up and down the Cimarron River. So we're working on trying to put this all together and then integrate it with data processing, data sharing, data analytics, and then really to come up with some tools like the ag tools that are available on the Mesonet, other tools.
Yeah. Will this be standalone from the Mesonet? Will this be a separate service from the Mesonet, or will this be integrated into it?
Well, initially it will probably be a standalone entity, but we've got as our partners OU and the Mesonet. We've got USDA. We've got OWRB. Again, this is just the initial phase one that's kind of getting the concept together. We have put together a phase 2 request through OSU administration. We'll see where that goes, but there's definitely a huge need for it. But to have a water monitoring network like we have for weather would really put Oklahoma at the center of the universe for research, for developing tools and applications that things we can't even think of right now that look at all the tools that are available via the Mesonet.
Wow.
And so that's our vision for it. We presented this at a couple of conferences in the fall, including the Governor's Water Conference.
This is not only surface water, but also subsurface water.
Surface water, subsurface, soil moisture, as well as aquifers and water tables.
That's amazing. Golly.
Back on the Mesonet upgrades, you're talking about, a lot of those moisture sensors have been in the ground for a long time, and the technology was maintained across most of them, so we had uniform technology, correct?
Right.
So what with the new sensors that you guys are wanting to install across the entire install, what's the differences, or why are they better, and what are we getting out of them?
Well, I don't think the final selection has been determined. Here over the last few months, they've been looking at different sensors, different technologies. As of 1st of December, I think it was real close to making the decision, but I've been out of town on vacation, and so I don't know if a final decision has been made. They will compare the old sensors to new sensors. They don't want to just totally wipe out all the old data,
right,
starting with new sensor systems. So the folks at the Mesonet are being very, very meticulous and going through a lot of testing and research to make sure that they do this right.
Yeah.
We're not going to get money for a do-over if we don't do it right.
Well, and the Mesonet, they're 30 years into their program, and this is a great starting point, a great time to build on top of that. So, man, whenever you were trying to determine if there was a need for this, who did you bring into the conversation? Was it landowners? Was it producers? Government officials? All the above?
All of the above.
Yeah.
And working, with our Rural Renewal Initiative, we've had a couple of projects related to drought mitigation.
Right.
Some of the economic impacts due to drought, pointed out some of the needs. Working with some of the government agencies like USDA, NRCS, and really, it's something that there are bits and pieces of it already in place. The USGS has some monitoring. The Corps of Engineers has some monitoring. OWRB, but it's not tied together real well.
Would this mean that in the long run, because I go to the Corps of Engineers lake levels all the time, whether it's for seeing what Lugert's at,
right,
or whether it's for fishing, one of the two. I mean, they're for me. I like looking at those. So would this actually bring in the core data into a larger... Where's that at?
That was yesterday at Hugo.
Releasing water at Hugo.
Wow.
Lots of water.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
So would it potentially bring in that core? Because you don't have to recreate the core data.
Right, exactly. We just, in fact, we're trying to schedule a kind of a side meeting here in the next few weeks with kind of the data processing people to look at how do we have compatible data formats and be able to exchange data. We've got David Williams over at the Corps of Engineers in Tulsa, who's head of hydraulics and hydrology, all the core water stuff. He's involved with the project. And one of our former OSU students, a BAE graduate, she's involved in charge of a lot of their big data and data analytics efforts.
Are all the groups playing well together right now?
So far, and it really helps when you have $1.8 million to kind of facilitate play.
A nice glue to hold everybody together.
Right. Shocking what money will do, but
it is. But the amazing thing is that everybody kind of knows everybody in this area because working in the area of water resources in Oklahoma, if you do that very long, you get to meet a lot of these people, and two, we have a lot of connections OSU around the state with regard to water resources, and so. I think everybody really wants this to be successful and is really being cooperative.
One thing about the Oklahoma Mesonet, it kind of set the standard for other Mesonets across the state or across the country. Is there a foot or an example for you to go off of, or is this much like the Mesonet setting the standard for others across the state?
Yeah, we're using the Mesonet as a perfect example. And in fact, Chris Freibrick, the executive director of Mesonet's on our leadership team.
Oh, that's great.
So,
Very insightful guy.
And one of the main cooperators.
Yeah.
And so it was, kind of interesting at the very beginning when we had to send over $500,000 of funding down to OU,
That's great. But so is there another system like this HydroNet across the country anywhere? Integrating all the resources.
California has tried to integrate a lot of their water resource, but California is so huge.
Oh, yeah.
And they've got so many different agencies and organizations involved with water.
Right.
Their water system is extremely complex.
Right.
And so we're not as big as California, but we have all the same issues of water quality, water availability, drought, flood.
That's great.
So,
wow.
So you started off by giving an example of the Cimarron only has maybe one monitoring, throughout the whole So if you were to increase that in perfect world, what's a successful number to do that, or how many stations or monitoring sites are you going to need to successfully say, at least in Oklahoma, we're getting a good handle of the Oglala Aquifer to know true
1 million.
levels? Yes.
Well, that's a great
as many as you can.
Every
but
10 feet across the state.
What's a flag that says we've at least made that first good success?
Well, that's a great question, because the spatial resolution is, like with the Mesonet, is 120 weather stations scattered across 77 counties. Is that enough? Is that too much? I think NexRad Doppler radar has really helped with the rainfall, interpolation between stations. So it's a great question, and because of that, Sherry Hunt with the USDA, ARS, and Stillwater has a research project, and they've got two watersheds that they're going to do very high spatial resolution monitoring. One is Sugar Creek watershed out in Caddo County, which was one of the very first NRCS small watershed dam projects going back into the 1950s. And so there are like 47 or so erosion control, water control structures in Sugar Creek watershed. The other one that's going to be set up as a research demonstration area is Stillwater Creek.
Wow.
So all the small lakes around Stillwater, McMurtry, Boomer, Lake Carl Blackwell, the creek will, Stillwater Creek will have a large number of water monitoring stations. And that's an ARS funded as well as our HydroNet funded. So it's taking ARS money for research and taking some of our HydroNet and putting those together.
Random question, just because you brought it up, and I've always. Where's the headwaters of Stillwater Creek? How far north does that go? Northwest.
Gee,
does it get up into Noble?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm pretty
That's what I was
sure
thinking.
because Lake McMurtry.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I mean, you look at
That's right.
Stillwater
That's what I
Creek
ended up,
by your old site there. I mean, that goes
Yeah,
well
that goes
far
way up.
to the
So,
west.
Can you spend like a moment or two to talk about what it would mean if we could fully monitor the Cimarron? What does that mean for anybody, just for the regular person along that basin?
Well, I think we could come up with some better advanced warning tools for flood. Really, water quality is another issue. And initially, we're not focusing on water quality so much. We're trying to measure amount and how much we have in different locations. But eventually, water quality will need to make this a world-class water monitoring network. We would have to eventually add water quality in there. Now, Cimarron River is probably not as significant as other rivers where there's what we call conjunctive use of water.
Yeah.
They're pumping groundwater near the river, and some studies are showing that that's reducing the flow in the rivers. And so by having good monitoring along the river, having good monitoring, you can see, there are some parts of the state where they think some of the issues with regard to decreased runoff is due to more pumping.
How well is the I just went blank on the river, but basically the port, everything there, Tulsa and south. How well is that?
Arkansas River,
verdigris. How well
the
is
Kerr
that?
McClellan water, that's very highly monitored by the Corps of Engineers, because they've got to be able to, manage barge traffic.
So that would that be kind of the maybe the goal if we get all rivers as well monitored as that one, or even looking at monitoring that one better?
Well, I think this is where Dr. Ochsner and really talking about overall water balance and water budget, when you include surface water, water in aquifers, and then soil moisture.
Yeah.
There's a tremendous amount of water that is stored in soil moisture that we really, may not have a good understanding how that fits into the whole ecosystem and the whole water, balance of a whole watershed.
There has been a focus on irrigation efficiency. Just from my casual observation, probably in the past 10 years or so, people are really maybe a little longer, but they're really paying attention to the use of the aquifers. This is a great tool to help with that. And will it be at current irrigation pivots, or will it be away from those where they can actually see not directly the water that's being drawn, but the actual status of the
the spacing between groundwater monitoring wells is some places really large around the state. Having closer spacing and monitoring will be more useful to growers, just like having a mesonet station within 10 miles is a lot better than having, just the weather station at Will Rogers Airport.
Right.
Well, your question is really good, is that, do we have enough mesonet stations? And the answer is, how far am I away from a mesonet station if we have enough or not?
Well, and I think the other thing that kind of come to mind is what am I using it for?
Yeah.
Because I feel like some people don't use mesonet because the general public, because you get onto that site and there's hours worth of data that you could potentially access, and for us and potentially growers, it's like, no, we need more stations. But for general public, it's like, no, there's maybe not too many stations, but it's collecting too much information for me to get what I actually need. So that is a fine balance of seeing the trees through the forest or the forest through the trees kind of situation on. But it really is, who's your end user? What's your goal there?
So on what Josh just was talking about, all that data, how exciting is this for the science community?
Data analytics on all this it could make Oklahoma, like I said, the center of the universe for research. Big data, data informatics. With regard
from
to water.
geology to remote imagery, you have every field would have interest in this data set.
Oh, yeah. And, there are huge questions like, look at the situation at Lugard Altus.
Yeah.
And how often they've delivered irrigation water to the irrigation district over the last 10, 20 years. And is some of it due to climate change? Is some of it due to increased pumping upstream? Altus Air Force Base is a huge economic engine to southwest Oklahoma. What is the water security situation for all of southwest Oklahoma? So southwest Oklahoma has its own unique issues. Southeast
and
Oklahoma.
We had Keith Felty on, and he'll be on a previous podcast.
Yeah.
So we kind of talked a little bit about the uniqueness of that Lugard district.
Yeah.
And then southeast.
And yesterday I was down in southeast Oklahoma, and down there a lot of times it's too much water.
Right.
And they were at Hugo yesterday. They had the spillway gates open, letting out a lot of water.
Which the state of Texas is like, yes, thank you. Oh, wait, we need this in the summer.
I thought we were pumping it all the way to the Panhandle. I thought we were going
is that what it is?
From Broken Bow to the High Plains.
Well, some folks have talked about that over the years. So
just a couple pumping stations to move it up an elevation of 3,000 foot.
Give or take.
So we've put together a Phase 2 white paper. OSU administration has it, and for a $1.5 million follow-on Phase 2. Part of that includes more opportunities for student involvement, undergraduate, graduate student research, K-12 STEM activities with regard to water and earth science.
Oh man, that's great.
Special programming for extension educators with regard to, just like what West Lane does with the Mesonet. We envision a similar type system if the HydroNet does, get built out, and all the pieces, like I said, Corps of Engineers, Geological Survey. There are a lot of the pieces already in place. It's not like we are starting from scratch.
No.
Wow,
that's cool.
And we would love it to be a joint cooperative effort, just like the Mesonet, OSU, OU, the two flagship universities, partnering together on it. And I've worked with several of the civil environmental engineering faculty at OU over the years. We have a former OSU professor who's now head of the Oklahoma Water Survey, Dr. Jason Vogel.
Oh, I didn't realize Vogel was.
Okay.
And he is also a professor in civil and environmental engineering at OU that comes along with that. And so we've talked with him, and we've talked with OU about further expansion of their involvement. And so, again, this is for all of Oklahoma.
Well, that is amazing and very exciting for the state of Oklahoma. All aspects, not just agriculture, but municipalities, just all sides of it.
Especially right now, they're in the process of updating the state water plan for the next 25 years, and this would be a great addition to put in the state water plan. Maybe we've talked with Owen Mills about that.
If the money's approved tomorrow, when will we get the app and be able to say, man, I can go look at the Kiamichi River and know exactly how much water's in there?
Well, I can't predict that.
Right.
I would defer that to Dr. Wagner, Dr. Ochsner.
Right.
And,
he's not admissible to say.
I want to put it this way. He's probably going to be in Florida by the time that happens.
Blink twice for 2 years. Blink 3 times for 4 years.
Actually, I'll be working part-time on this project.
Awesome. I was
That's
next
great.
year. I kind of had a feeling.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for going on with us and talking about this. This is big news for Oklahoma.
It's a great, great opportunity for the state of Oklahoma, and again, OSU is going to be right in the middle of it. And so,
Thanks, Paul.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you for listening in on this conversation of the Red Dirt Agronomy Podcast. And if you'd like to join the next discussion, send us an email, podcast@reddirtagronomy.com, or send us a tweet. Our handle is RedDirtAg. We'd like to thank Wes Lee from the Oklahoma Mesonet, as well as Oklahoma State University's Dr. Paul Weckler, for joining us on this podcast as we recorded it from the Oklahoma Wheat Commission and Oklahoma Wheat Growers Association booth at the KNID AgriFest earlier this month. If you get a chance, head over to our website where you can find out more information about our guests, along with any of the resources that they talked about today or on any previous podcast. Visit reddirtagronomy.com. For Dr. Josh Lofton and Dr. Brian Arnell, I am Dave Deacon, and thank you for listening. The proceeding is a copyrighted recording of Agnow Media LLC 2024. And yes, all rights are reserved.